About the economy. China has been a critical trade partner with not only the U.S. but the world because it is the second largest economy in the world. But we've had a historically opening up of trade with China. Our next guest thinks maybe that needs to change. Jeff Smith is Director of Asian Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jeff, good to see you again. You know, I like to say that, you know, when you're talking about world trade, there's all of the countries in the world, and then there's China, just based upon the size. What you call it decoupling. Is that an option if we get so much from them now? Are there alternatives to China?
Well, I don't think decoupling has to involve a complete elimination of all trade with China. I think we still do hundreds of billions of dollars a year in trade with China, and not all of it is problematic, frankly. I mean, if we want to trade textiles with China and clothing, that's fine. Our real issue is with strategic products. We cannot have an adversary of the United States controlling our supply chains of pharmaceuticals or of wartime materials. And some of these supply chains, for us to be a safe and sovereign country, are going to either have to be moved back to the United States or be sourced to friendlier countries, maybe in the Western Hemisphere, or allied countries in Europe or other parts of Asia. And some of that restructuring might be a little painful, but I would rather take a little pain now than a lot of pain in the future if we found ourselves in a conflict with China and gave China a veto over the operation of our economy.
The strategic concerns are real, though. What kinds of items are we talking about which are manufactured in China right now that the United States might want to think twice about having been made over there?
Well, there's a lot, frankly, and honestly, it was the COVID-19 pandemic that first opened our eyes to just how many of our supply chains are sourced in China. And that was the basic pharmaceuticals became a huge issue. Of late, really in the past few weeks, the latest issue has been rare earths, and specifically magnets that happen to be critical to the operation of a wide variety of industrial products that I think maybe we didn't even realize until China decided to close off the tap a few weeks ago, and we began to feel real pain. But it isn't just trade, it isn't just products, frankly. It's also this idea that we opened up our economy to China for so many decades and allowed it to operate in the United States that we now have Chinese drones flying around in the U.S. that are sending their feedback, their data back to Beijing. We have Chinese lobbyists operating in Washington, D.C. and in state capitals. You don't have U.S. lobbyists operating in Beijing and lobbying the Chinese Communist Party. You've got Chinese apps like TikTok that is sending information back to Beijing, while U.S. apps aren't allowed to operate in China. So you've got this whole ecosystem of Chinese activities, of Chinese personnel, of Chinese supply chains that we've exposed ourselves to that we're finding to be increasingly problematic, that we need to roll back in many cases.
Jeff, there's one other thing that China seems to be buying up, which they're not making a lot of new of, and that's land, specifically farmland. You know, we've heard from folks in the agricultural services that there are a lot of concerns right now about how much farmland Chinese companies have been buying up in the United States. What is the ends to the means on that? Are they looking to control the food supply as well?
That is a concern. Frankly, that's a major concern. But the other concern is that much of this farmland that seems to be purchased by Chinese entities has some kind of proximity to a U.S. military base or critical infrastructure, or provides, geographic proximity to sensitive U.S. facilities. And so we've seen actually states begin to take the lead and say, you know what, if the federal government isn't going to act on this, we in our state legislature and in our governor's office are going to come in and say foreign adversaries are not allowed to buy farmland near sensitive facilities in our state. And at the Heritage Foundation, we've seen this topic become such a priority that we've crafted model legislation to give to the states to say, if you want to ban Chinese farmland in your state, this is the best way to do it. This is the template that you should adopt and then adapt it to your own state's needs. And in fact, this is just one area where we're seeing the states get out in front of the federal government and push back, even though international relations has traditionally been the purview of the feds.
All right, Jeff Smith is the Director of Asian Studies over at the Heritage Foundation. Jeff, we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us.